My name is Mr Morrell and I live in Carterton in the Wairarapa. I grew up with the railways as a young child, living with my grandparents, and then later on through the Navy, and then I got married and had kids and two little boys, and obviously little boys like trains, and with my love of trains, so I built a layout for them and it just grew from there. I first started off with an N-gauge layout for the boys that was on casters in the garage, and then when we moved house and they got older, that moved on and I built another layout because I got into NZR modelling. This is all up in Auckland. I got into NZR modelling when I joined the North Shore Model Railway Club. 10 years with them and I got converted to NZR modelling. So I built a layout at home, and then when I got a posting with the Navy down to Trentham, and we bought this place. Said, I'm going to have a train run. I like modelling. I mean, even as a child, I used to buy many kit sets, planes, tanks, cars, rocket ships, the whole lot. And I've always just loved sitting down at the kitchen table and model away after school, after done my homework, and that just went right through to up till I joined the Navy. And so even later on, when I got into the hobby itself of NZR modelling, I like tinkering and making things. If you couldn't buy a kit, I'd build one. Within the NZR modelling, the main scale is 3/16. Now there are kits out both in the rolling stock and in the locomotives, and there are limited kits out in the building structures. So if you want to get the full scale of NZR modelling, i.e. all the buildings, you've really got to learn to make them yourself. Whether you use cards, scale lumber, whatever means you can. So you've got to be quite creative. You've got to think outside the box, you know. Like, I'll go to a shop and I'll be looking at something and I go, I can use that. That'll work perfectly. Completely different to what it was identified originally for. I was quite fortunate to have the room. I built the shed, which is 12 by 6 metres, and the layout itself is 8 metres by 4. So we've got the space on this side just for like a lounge, drink and whatever I do. But it originally started, I just wanted to build the layout itself, and then over the last 10-15 years, I've got other fellow modellers in the Wairarapa here who come to here and we do workshops. I go to Pokaka each year. For the last 36 years in the NZR modelling, we've run a weekend of modelling at Pokaka, which is 18 k's north of Ohakuni. Right, we get about 20 to 25, up to 30 modellers every year. And Pokaka 36 this year, second weekend in November, is already on the cards. Anyway, going back last year, Paul Mahoney came along for the weekend, and we talked about the Pokaka mill. And I couldn't do it, but all the others did a trip into the forest area. They found the old tracks. We got photos of it. Absolutely stunning. All the sleepers, rail is still there. I've got a drone and I did an aerial photograph of the mill there and compared it with photographs going back to the early 50s. I was very fortunate with him on the Sunday of last year was to go to Egmont. I think it's called the Egmont Milling Company. It's just by National Park, and we actually drove the truck down the old Bush Railway road. Well, it was the track back then, but it's the road now. I was very interested to see all the cuttings are still there. You've got to start somewhere with modelling, and whether you start with a plastic toy train set and then go from there, or you already have some good modelling skills, you pick up. So it's in different stages. You're never too old to learn, and you're never too young to start. And the train shows are a really good way of doing that. And it doesn't matter what your skill level is, you take your layout to the show, and people can see at the different levels and skills of a layout of what it looks like. And I know for a fact with Kerosene Creek, when I take that is like number one of the best layouts, and it's won every show that it goes to, basically, because nothing can compare to it. Where the others, though they're very nice and they're highly detailed, in some aspects they're just depicting trains going round and round in a circle. where I could run nothing on Kerosene Creek or catch people's eye, and they just come back and look at it and look at it and look at it all the time, because there is so much detail there. But also, I like it going to the shows because people ask me, oh, how did you make that? How did you do that? And so I'm interacting with the public, and I tell them of my web page and on the Facebook page where they can get the files and print them off and have a go at doing themselves. I've just started with the Bush Railway. Going back about 5 years ago, many people would know, maybe even longer than that actually, there was a small bush layout called Kerosene Creek. Now that was owned by Rail Quinn, and I saw that layout and met Rail when I was at the North Shore Model Railway Club, and this is going back to the early 90s. It's just an awesome little layout, and it would be the best in the Southern Hemisphere by far. On a train shows, it's been all over New Zealand. Early in 2000, about 2004 I think it was, I bought Kerosene Creek off, not from Rail, but from a person, Morris Mount, who passed away. Originally, Morris bought Kerosene Creek off Rail, and I wanted it, but I didn't have the funds. And I always said to Morris, I said, if anything happens with you or you don't want it, I want first dibs. And well, he kept that promise. And so, long story short, I bought Kerosene Creek, and I've had it ever since. So I'm sort of the gatekeeper of that. I take it to shows. As I said, the last show I went to was in Wellington last year. Prior to that was in Christchurch, Hamilton, Auckland. It's just an amazing, highly detailed, and it depicts Bush Railway, New Zealand Bush Railway. But you're limited with that scale to some of the fineness that you require that you just can't do in 3/16. One of the burning questions on that little layout was a double-ender truck that was built by Paul Bernstein, and it's basically called Ollie's double-ender. And it's 12-wheel drive, and it had chains on it, but in that scale we couldn't put chains because you just can't find chains small enough. And so the desire came, and I found, well, let's go one scale up, and I was able to find chain. So the bug came in, and I started doing things in 1/48 scale. It's just such an easier scale to work with, and you can find more detailed parts. I met a fellow modeller down in Christchurch, who's now up in Motueka, not Motueka, just up by Blenheim somewhere. He started me by building a Heisler, converting a Heisler, an ON30 Heisler to NZR. And I followed him, and we worked together, and he said, well, let's do a V now. So we did a V together. And then I've continued that, and I've virtually done an array of all the bush locos that ran in New Zealand. On my bench top, I've got an array of bush railway stock now. I've got nearly about 13 different lokies, as we call them, and I've got nowhere to run them. I can run them on my NZR layout, but they won't go through their tunnels because that's all to scale on that. So talking to a few fellow modelers, we said, well, let's build one for the public, but let's learn the lessons from public displays and not put them on this layout. So a lot of design went into this layout that we built. Well, I've built it basically all myself now, and it measures, when it's made up, it measures 4.8 metres by 1200 metres. Now, if you split that in half, that's a 1200 by 2400 sheet, which is the standard sheet that you can buy in ply, styrene, or whatever. So I bought 4 sheets of styrene, 100mm thick, and laminated 2 sheets together of part A and part B, and then through some design phases we were able to connect those 2 units together. There's quite some unique features in that hide everything around the layout, so there's no plugs, there's no clips or anything that will catch. Also designed the layout so for lightness. I think all up over it wouldn't even weigh more than 40 kilos. Easy for 2 people to carry. It's designed so that one part of the layout will flip on top of the other layout with a divider wall, and all clipped together and transportable. The layout that we've built, it's portable for public display, right? 4.8 by 1200 metres in length when it's set up. The reason I wanted it for public running is because no one's seen bush railway. It's gone. You know, we're talking the 50s and 60s, and it's all been ripped up and disappeared. And the only people that know about it are those that once operated it or worked in the bush railways, and many of them have passed on now. So to let people today see how we used to log using railway.
Yeah, I'm going to do a fire scene here. So put a fence here along here, and then the locos come past and it spark out, and we've got a small grass fire, and then we can have the static displays of the 2 fire engines, the real bush fire trucks, and a couple of guys putting the fire out. It'll look quite nice, just a nice little scene on its own.
I wanted to pick a scene, basically, so when someone comes and looks at the layout, they'll see a log wagon or a Loki running around the layout. To me, that's just a moving object. I want them to look at the detail and go, wow, that's how it was, that's how they used to do it. Doesn't matter what angle you're looking at the layout, you're going to see something that will of interest, and it's different. Whether it's a gully or a gorge or a cutting or a swamp or an angle into the engine shed or a turntable where they used to turn them, it's going to catch the eye and you're going to go, wow, I like that. My first book that I bought that's really aided me was a book by Paul Mahoney, Era of the Bush Tramway. Once you read that book, you get hooked very easily. And from there, it was going on the net and finding other books that I could use for Bush Railway, and then also video clippings. But I was still limited, so I decided, being a Facebook fan, and I already run a Facebook group for New Zealand NZR modelers, I decided, let's create a New Zealand Bush Railway Facebook page and try and find those people that used to work in the bush railways, whether they were drivers or forestry or railway, and get their point of view and get their photographs on the page, and it's worked. Right, I've got 2 layouts that I send to the public. One is Kerosene Creek, which is S-scale Bush Railway, and the one that I'm making now is ON30 New Zealand Bush Railway. Both of these layouts are on display at shows around the country. Check your local paper for when the next model train show is, and hopefully we will see each other there.